Okay, welcome back, those of you that stayed and are awake. Our first presentation will be Viveka Prana, who, as you all know, is across town. She's in the Convent extension over there. And she will be giving her reminiscences. It will be on the screen, and then it will be followed by Lavanya's reminiscences. And I think everyone knows Lavanya. She and Tatwamasi were devotees in the late 60s in Hollywood and here. So I guess we can start with Viveka Prana.
I think since we discovered Vedanta, we were looking for a spiritual path, and we went to a lecture in Hollywood, and there was Bhajan was the assistant at the time, and he just lit up our world because of the talk that he gave and so many things that we believed, and we thought, well, this is it. We were looking, and then it was close to the 4th of July, and we went to Trabuco to the 4th of July, and I met the ladies of the Sarada Convent, and they were so lovely and darling and loving, and we really just connected with each other. And they said, come to Santa Barbara and visit us, and we thought that was a great idea. So I think very soon, maybe a week after, the next day that we had off work, we drove up to Santa Barbara, and we looked in and went into the temple, and it was gorgeous and it completely deserted. We were but when we turned up on Ladera Lane, it was one of those perfect, beautiful, warm kind of spring days. And I just felt this wave, and I thought, I'm home. I never really felt that before. Viveka Prana was amazing. No matter what she was doing, she would drop, she would drop everything, and it was, oh, little darling, you're here. And then she would give you her complete undivided attention, and it always made you feel loved. And I remember when Viveka Prana passed, I was at the table when she died, also with everybody else. It was a Sunday dinner. And they asked me to make some telephone calls and tell people that she'd passed. The paramedics had just come. I think they just were arriving. So I called a couple people, and one of the women that I'd known forever came to the temple, and she got there. Everybody was so upset. And she said to me, Viveka Prana loved me best. And I thought, yes, she made everybody feel like she loved them best. It was her gift. It was wonderful. But I think that this particular convent in this beautiful place is just such a gift to everyone, because it's just uplifting to walk into the property. It's so beautiful. And all those worships that are done every day, and the little shrine, which is divine. All the swamis that have visited, Viveka used to come all the time. Many, many swamis came, and they came down the street to our house too, which, what grace. Incredible blessing. So.
In seeing the convent from then until now, is there a theme that you see in it? Is there a common thread through it?
I think it's amazing what these younger girls have done since the older ones have left us. And the continuity of the energy and the work that they put into sustaining the convent and making it available to people and giving people this wonderful island of serenity. Mm-hmm. That they can visit. And I think everybody feels that, even people that are not Vedantists, when they come, everybody comes to Santa Barbara, especially visitors. It's one of the highlights of the tour in Santa Barbara is to come to the temple.
Yes.
And of course, yes, when my husband died unexpectedly, we were robbed in our store, and Shuddha Prana and Krishna Prana jumped in the car and drove to Santa Monica to be of comfort to me, which was absolutely so sweet of them. It's a long drive, mm-hmm. And it was in the evening, if I recall, when they came. And then I was worried about Ted and the way he died so suddenly, and he was talking to the police when he died. And Viveka Prana was enormously helpful. She said, don't even worry about it, what's happening. She said, he's with Ramakrishna. He's moved on. He's not. I didn't know if his spirit was kind of lingering. I wasn't sure what was happening. but she just assured me that he was in the hands of Mother and Ramakrishna and that he was going to be fine. And I believed everything Prabhupada said, so it was very, very comforting. Prabhupada thought women did wonderful work spiritually and was very, very committed into making a place for women monastics. And being a woman, I always appreciated that. And he was if anybody asked to join, he was very sure of who would make it and who wouldn't. But he was very, very kind to all the people that asked, and many people that I've met in Santa Barbara in the many years that I've lived here that are not involved with Vedanta, at one point had asked Prabhupada if they could join. Perhaps their reasons were not great, but he seemed to have picked the right ones. So. I just think it's been such a blessing in my life. I can't imagine this part of my life without Vedanta. It's changed the entire trajectory of my experience on the planet.
Well, I have way too many, so I'll just restrict myself to a few. There are about 68 years of memory, so it's way too many. Probably my earliest memory here is my dad was working at Disney's and had borrowing privileges, so he would bring films up on Saturday and show the nuns some sort of Disney movie, and then we would attend this Sunday service. That was even before the temple. And then, of course, the temple came up. But, about 6. But I'll spend most of my time on Viveka Prana. Viveka Prana went to Northwestern, and interestingly enough, she remembers Atma. Atma was working in the music library, and she was a music major, and she remembers him. She was then briefly married to a Henry Holt, who was a conductor. It was not a successful marriage, and after the divorce, she found Vedanta and was very eager to become a nun. Swami Prabhupada kept saying, no, it's not quite your time yet. So she waited and waited. She had to find jobs. So for a while, she was working for a harp repair shop. And one summer, she taught me piano. I was in junior high, and the current chapel accompanied us. We had a chapel service every morning. I was at an Episcopal school, and they needed a new chapel player. So she taught me how to play hymns. I was already a pianist and had studied piano for several years, but we had a specific job to do that summer, and she taught me how to play hymns correctly. Her favorite hymn was, "Once to every man and nation comes the time to decide." And of course, this was her time when she was hoping to become a nun. And she said that was her favorite hymn. So she finally was able to join the convent, and she was a little bit fragile on the emotional side, you could say. And she got the nickname Vipika. Her Sanskrit name was Deepika, and so they changed it to Vipika. But she was one of these people who was impeccably neat, impeccably organized, to a fault. I mean, it was a wonderful quality in her, and yet it could drive other people a little crazy because she was just so detailed. I remember my mother telling stories about the garland. She used to manage the garland making for the pujas, and she would have every single garland detailed to the number of petals. You put 26 yellow petals, followed by 18 red petals, followed by so forth and so on, for every single garland, for every single puja. That's the kind of detailedness she would go to. And the convent schedule, they used to joke about how someone would change or add to the salt shakers every so many days, had to check the salt shakers. So she was very, very detailed. She did absolutely beautiful shrine decorations when she would decorate with the flowers, very creative. She, having a musical background, she also learned Indian music. When she went to India, she studied how to do the Indian bhajans. She did the Ram Nams for years. She also had a propensity for finding bhajans that were very difficult. Somehow she liked to conquer these difficult, things in 7/4 time and some peculiar raga. But she was very good at it. And she, in her younger days, she had a very nice voice. Then she worked on the bulletin for many years, organizing who was going to speak where and when. She did classes on Advaita for many, many years, had a very dedicated study circle. She even did a class at the Theosophical Society and had it translated into Spanish, and then the person that was helping her with that ended up publishing a book in Spanish. She also was a great Guru Bhakta. She would celebrate Swami Prabhavananda's birthday every year with puja. She would make sure she was going to be assigned to do the puja on that day. Then she came to help in the office and worked with me in the office for many years. And she was a saint to put up with me, so she did very well. It was a nice relationship. I remember another incident that was kind of humorous. Sometimes you think of everyone being kind of straight-laced and serious, and she was a very serious student. Oh my goodness, the preparation she'd do for her classes were just unbelievable amount of preparation. But one Halloween, it was a Thursday night, and she and Bhakti Prana alternated the Thursday night classes. So she got everybody to dress up in costumes, and she was crawling around behind the pews with sticks holding up little ghost figures all through Bhakti Prana's class, and Bhakti Prana did not blink an eye. She went right through. It didn't faze her a bit. So she was a really wonderful character. Even in her, when she was in St. John's, and her mind had gone because of her Parkinson's, she had kind of her own little world where she was going to give a class that afternoon. Oh yes, I'm going to do an Advaita class over there and this afternoon. So that was with her till the end. So just a couple of other brief things about some of the others. Bhakti Prana had been a violin student at Juilliard, and I used to get to play string quartets and trios with her. Bhava Prana, who I'm sure all of you knew from here, she was our cellist many of the times, and Lavanya's husband was the other person that played cello for us. So that was always kind of fun. And someone's probably going to talk about her San Diego days, right? So I don't have to cover that. I'm going to do it. Somebody's going to do it. Sarada Prana was a lovely person. My mother helped in the bookshop, so I got to know all these people. She would take me on summers to be with her in the bookshop, and I would do little things. So I got to know these people. And Sarada Prana was always so enthusiastic about books. She was the reader for the bookshop and catalog. She would read through the books and find out what they should be carrying. And she'd always had some good recommendation that my mother would then buy and read and get excited about. And Ananda Prana, my goodness, she was just one of these super organized and hardworking people. People like Sarada Prana, and she sometimes had some difficulties. They were just very different temperaments. When you're someone like Ananda Prana with that much energy and drive, it's hard sometimes to put up people that are a little bit more relaxed. But they were all wonderful people, and you could tell that they were happy to be there. It was a big, happy family. My earliest memory of any nun is Satya Prana. Probably the second time I was taken to the temple, which I was probably 5, Satya Prana gave me a few of the little cufflinks that Ujjala had had. Ujjala had just passed away, and she was distributing the things from her estate. So that's my earliest memory of her. Then there was a nun, Yashoda. She never took vows, but she had a terrible weight problem and such bad arthritis that she was on crutches. And so she went on a diet called the Beeler diet. And pretty soon she was walking, and she'd lost a ton of weight, and pretty soon everybody was on the Beeler diet. It was a big fad up there. Yoga Prana had an interesting, you always ask, how did you come to Vedanta? Well, I heard from her friend Aboya, who had been Swami Prabhavananda's nurse, that she and Yoga Prana and another one of our devotees named Ganga, or Jean Matlock, hello, had been searching all over for some sort of spiritual home. Amy, what was it? Simpleton McPherson, yes, and so forth. Then one night they were using a Ouija board, and the Ouija board spelled out 1946 Ivar, and so they ended up at the temple. So Yoga Prana was really one of these very cheery people, and somehow they had this thing about teddy bears. And they had this teddy bear club, and people would buy them each teddy bears, and they would talk about being in the teddy bear club. She was the treasurer for many years, so I can certainly relate to her that way too. But then she had to take care of her mother, Mother Hubble, who lived at the temple for many years, and that really kind of broke her. It was just very difficult for her to carry on the convent schedule and to have to take care of her mother at the same time. So anyway, those are some of my memories. I'll just tell one funny story about Viveka Prana. As I'm sure everybody will say she was just the hostess with the mostest. Even if she stuck her foot in her mouth, she would take it out very gracefully. One time at the dinner table on Sunday after the lecture, one of the devotees had brought a pie. And she says, "Oh, my dear, this is just divine. We must simply have the recipe." And she says, "Well, I just bought it at the store." "But the brand, we must know the brand."
Now we'll have Bobby Lesser come up, and he will read Jeffrey Long's, Andrew Fort's, Pico Iyer's reminiscences, and give some of his own. Hard act to follow,
Thank you.
Bobby.
An impossible act to follow. That is the funniest anecdote I ever heard. Boy, those earlier, before when we were communing with the outer realms there, it was like a long-lost episode of Mork and Mindy for a while, wasn't it? I felt I could understand some of that stuff also, which this is such a special day, such a special place anytime we can be together or alone in this temple. I think the first time, and I'm not very sure of the first time, but I know I was probably trying to keep up with my wife, Annie, who on one of her walks that she usually called a hike for good reason. And we had a friend who lived at the corner down here, and I think Annie had heard that there's some interesting sites up on Ladera. And I wasn't sure whether she was looking for real estate or what. She didn't tell me. But we trotted on up the hill. And if you ever happen to run into us on any of our walks, you'll always see I'm about 20, 30 yards behind her, because she walks very quickly. And we got to the entrance to the temple, and I was so relieved to get someplace because it was quite steep. And when I got here and came into the temple and sat down, I was so happy just to be sitting and catching my breath and feeling peaceful and no one telling me to keep up and that we were here, we were someplace. And the simplicity of that feeling has stayed with me whenever I get to this temple, whether it's filled with devotees and friends that I've known over, well, I think it's close to 25 years. But the temple to me is a holy, special place of rest and meditation. And I was going to save my reminiscence for the end. This is just a little bit of it. I'd like to read something that's quite beautiful from Pico Iyer. And he calls it our second deeper home. For as long as I can remember, the Vedanta temple has been the spiritual epicenter of my Santa Barbara. It sits high above the ocean on a quiet road that leads up into the hills. You step out of your car into a pulsing silence and meet a weathered green bell that suggests a mountain in Kyoto. Behind a soaring temple that itself speaks for some harmonious meeting place of India and Japan. Golden poppies in the sun, well tended, and a glassy bookshop to one side, alight with books of wisdom and whirling statues. Everyone knows it, and everyone meets there because it sings out to a universal longing. We, all of us, at our better moments, that there's a truth beyond what we see, and that we are free insofar as we can let go of our little selves. If only we can stand, as this temple does, serene amidst the changing world. Forest fires, bears, mudslides often surround it. We can see what passes and what belongs to some more lasting sphere. To step inside the temple is to feel the immediate possibility of something true. For me, as for so many others, it has been a sanctuary, a solace, a stimulation. I remember coming here as a boy to hear Christopher Isherwood and other wise voices tell us of how we have everything we need right here, if only we can wake up to it. I buy birthday presents for my most cherished friends in the bookstore, drive up to sit in the temple, or even on its steps whenever I need to clear my head and remember what I love. My mother used often to give lectures here, to bring students to the services. She came every year at Durga Puja. She brought me for lunch so we could enjoy the remarkable community of nuns with their memories of Germany and Peking. Some of our closest lifelong friends are sisters of the Sarada Convent, not least because they can be relied upon for a liberating joke, constant counsel, and a sympathetic ear close to midnight when the world seems to be coming apart. It's hard to know how many of us would survive without the Vedanta temple. It shines like a candle in some corner of ourselves that too often we forget. It reminds us of a stillness in the center of the tumult where we can see what lies beyond our words and ideas. It gives us clear and friendly companion teachers who express eternal truths in a language anyone can follow. I still remember when my father was dying in a local hospital and my mother didn't know where to turn. Then we called our friend from the Vedanta temple who would bring holy water from the Ganges, even at the dead of night, so that something of the ancient blessing of India could anoint us all. The heart of worship in every tradition is community and love, and through their selfless service, the sisters of the Vedanta temple remind us of that daily and of the divinity within us all. It's from Pico Iyer. And this is a reminiscence from Andrew Fort. I have had the great pleasure to know and interact regularly with Viveka Prana during her time as resident minister at the Dallas Vedanta Society Center. I am now retired as Professor Emeritus of Asian Religions at Texas Christian University. During my time at TCU, I would visit with Brahmaprana regularly for tea and conversation about various aspects of Vedanta and the contemplative life. I would also, on occasion, attend visits from society swamis, and I made presentations at the center a couple of times. Further, because of my respect for her, I invited invited her over to TCU to discuss Vedanta when I taught a course on Hinduism. I always enjoyed and was edified by our various meetings, and I believe she is a marvelous representative of the society. Congratulations to her and to all on your Diamond Jubilee. And bless Baba Prana. Brahma Prana. I used to say Baba Prana very quickly so no one would notice. And no one ever corrected me till now. It's never too late to learn. This is from Jeffrey D. Long. For decades, the Pravajikas of the Sarada Convent have served as an inspiration and a source of both wisdom and consolation to devotees of Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother. This is true not only for devotees who live in California. Despite the great amount of work to which they are dedicated at the convent, their reach has spread far and wide. I can attest to this. It has been my immeasurable privilege to know and be friends with Pravajika Vrajaprana for the last 20 years. Apart from being a devotee, I am also a professor of religion and philosophy. I therefore attend the meetings of the American Academy of Religion, which are held annually in cities throughout North America. Vrajaprana and I met at an AAR meeting, and we began to correspond. And I frequently asked her questions about spiritual life and also for guidance in navigating the path of being both a devotee and a scholar of our tradition. Soon after meeting Vrajaprana, I read her wise little book, Vedanta, A Simple Introduction. I began assigning that wonderful book to my students, and I have continued to do so for the last 20 years. The students always love her book. She explains Vedanta clearly and accessibly, but that does not oversimplify anything. Probably my favorite story related to that book came from one of my students who began to read the book late one afternoon because I had assigned it. She was planning to read just a chapter or two and then continue with the rest of the book the following day. She became so absorbed in the book that she did not stop reading until she had finished the entire book, late in the night. I have had students who have given the book to their parents or their other professors after the course, and many have told me that their parents love the book as well. One of my colleagues, who was given the book by one of our students, also loved it and began practicing meditation as a result. Most recently, Vrajaprana played an important role in supporting the Vedanta Society of Central Pennsylvania, which my wife and I first established in our home in Elizabethtown about 5 years ago. It began as a set of small in-person gatherings every other month or so. In fact, when we initially started out as an in-person group, we began by reading through Vedanta, a simple introduction, and discussing it together at our sessions. When the pandemic and lockdown occurred, we shifted to being an online group, meeting via Zoom. In many ways, the restrictions of the lockdown created new opportunities, and it became very easy to ask many wonderful swamis and pravajikas to give guest lectures for our group online. The Sarada Convent is a real source of light and love and wisdom in a world which desperately needs it. A big thank you to all the sisters of Santa Barbara's Sarada Convent. Just one last reminiscence. You know, I found my spiritual home here at the temple also, and a chance to get closer to God. But in all my dreams, I never never thought that I would get a chance to play God. Virtually every year for the last, I think, 20 years. I don't know. That is a miracle. For an actor to get work at least once a year for 20 years is a miracle, I can tell you. I remember the first time we celebrated Christmas Eve. I don't remember what year it was. I think it's close to 20 years now. And at that time, Bimala, who became Siddha Prana a few years later, was a, what is the word for it? For a Pravajika before she becomes a brahmachari, not a charini, a brahmachari. She was a brahmachari, and a very dynamic one. And with Krishna Prana and Vraja Prana, as long as I'm using a showbiz analogy, they were like the executive producers and directors of this production that we wound up doing of the Nativity, to celebrate the Nativity. And at that time, I believe it was the first time that the fire department was loaning us goats to chew on the brush as a fire break. And Siddha Prana decided, well, we're going to have a manger here that's going to be close to a petting farm, as it turned out, because it was inhabited by a number of sheep who were well-rehearsed and well-behaved. I don't know if any of you were there that night. Yes. Really? Do you remember seeing a camel make an appearance? Because somehow I do. That might be something I wasn't there. No camels? Well, I got to be with real living angels in the loft right over there. I would come to Vespers and always thought those voices really came from heaven, but they were actually there playing, and with Gianti playing the piano and singing so beautifully, and Vrajaprana conducting brilliantly, like Leopold Stokowski. And I had my lines to learn. Of course, I got to read them. I didn't need a prompter, and I read them. There was one that I always stumbled over on the last line. I can't remember those three: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And I used to reverse them. And it's like I never got quite across the finish line of saying it without a little mistake. So much for the infallibility of God. And of course, I always remember Stephen being Santa Claus at the door in a kind of a scary Santa Claus outfit. And he was a tall man also, a wonderful man, but he seemed taller. I think he put something in his shoes on that night. And he would always, when I would arrive, he'd say, "Hello, God," and then remind me that I was a little late. Another time, when I came for the lecture on Sunday, he was cleaning up the leaves, and he always said, "Hello, God," to me. And I said, "Anything I can do?" And he said, "Grab a broom." So the humility, there was a one-night event for me to be God. Krishna Prana and Vraja Prana are two angels, I can tell you. And I don't know if they were there on that first day when we found the temple for the first time. But they were, certainly, in spirit. Their spirit and their heart and love is the guiding principle and light that keeps this place aglow for all of us. And it's with just deep, deep gratitude that I'm here to celebrate you both and all of the many wonderful nuns that I've known. And Devi Prana if you're still listening, we love you, and we miss seeing you. I'm sure we will see each other soon again. So thank you very much.
Now, Gloria, would you like to come up? Gloria? There you are. Gloria has the distinction of being the very last initiation of Song's Law. She scooted in.
Very end. Very end.
Just in time.
Yeah, 3 days before.
I know.
Yeah, it was great. Well, anyway, I'd like to begin by telling you how honored I am to be here, in your presence, standing here. It's a privilege to be in this place with you, my brothers and sisters. The convent's 75th celebration is a wonderful occasion for all of us to gather and to give thanks. It's also a wonderful opportunity to express our gratitude for the effort of the original 5 nuns and all the nuns that followed, and who are here present. Thank you. I want to thank you for your dedication. How I happen to be here is what I'm going to talk about and share. The conversation went something like this. A number of years ago, my dear friend Jib Witherall, neighbor, he's the one who opens up the door on Sunday, who lays out the yellow fire line, hoses in case of fire, does all sorts of things. Really great guy. He came to you one day and said, "Hey, Gloria, you want to help out at Transition House with the nuns and serve dinner?" And I said, "You know what, Jim? I've been to Transition House on and off through the years. I'm kind of a drop-in. I'm not much of a gatherer. And, and if it's feeding people, my impulse has always been there. Whether it's been in the Bowery of Chicago, whether it's rich or poor, it doesn't make any difference. It's always been about feeding people." So anyway, I showed up that night, and Vedanta served the best meal I'd ever seen served in a homeless shelter. The best meal. The nuns and their friends brought it. Not only did they serve it, they sat there and ate it with everyone. They weren't doing charity work. They were just there bringing dinner. If anyone has spent any time in homeless shelters doing this, you know the difference between charity work and people coming and serving. And that's what they did. The Vedanta service captured my attention because of it. The side note, I later found out that Krishna Prana had been serving dinner at Transition House every month for, I think, 35 years. Is that right? Close to, okay, a little more than 35 years. At Transition House, she'd gather together, people to help. They'd go in, rock in, serve, be with everyone, tidy up, and then we'd all head out. And there's always been a number of replacements. She's been the steady one. It's beautiful. After I went back a second time, and it was still the best meal I'd ever seen. And again, I just thought this is really extraordinary service to others. So I asked, does Vedanta ever need volunteers on the property? I didn't know, that they actually do. And a friend had taken me here about 10 years before to show me a pretty temple and pretty property, which was not that much of an interest for me. When I talked with the nuns, they said, okay. And so I started pulling gravel out of the driveway by the guest house, just so I could be on the sacred property. And they were really kind. They said, what would you like to do? I said, whatever you need done. And they're so courteous that I thought, we're going to have to work around this. And so I said, tell me the 3 things you need done, and then I can pick the one I really like doing, And then you get done what you want, and I'm always doing what I like. And when that's done, I'll come back and we can do 3 more things. And before long, here I am, right? It's bizarre. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I might mention, for years I'd been a reader of the Upanishads, and somehow I probably recognized that there was perennial wisdom within them. And I knew that I wanted to become wiser. I also knew that it had the capacity to train and grow me up in a right way. I didn't know if there were other groups that read this stuff, because I just came upon the Upanishads and stayed with them as my company. And I was satisfied there. And then when I discovered the convent nuns who had dedicated their lives to sacred service and to God and to others, I knew that it was a group that I could move alongside because of how they did it and what they did. My good fortune is that they allowed me to serve alongside of them. I'm not a monastic. I haven't dedicated my life in that way. I've been a householder and raised my own family and been a businesswoman. But they let me just work alongside. I got to see their dedication day in and day out. I got to see their dedication to the higher goals of Vedanta and rightful living. I got to see the benefit of that. And this care and keeping, I'm sure we've all received from them whenever our own need has presented. And they've done it with tremendous care and keeping for each one of us, if we think about it for a moment. We all have very dear memories. Almost 20 years ago was the first time that I attended Arati. By some happenstance, I was in Hardwar, India. My feet were in the Ganges. There were 100,000, well, probably 1,000 people crowding around, big music, big bells, big flames. And it was the most alive thing I'd ever seen. And I was home. The first time that I attended Arati here was very different. I'm going to get my right page. There was only gentle evening light coming through. Probably was October, November. There were no crowds of people, a delicate little bell ringing, and a small lamp being waved around. I was on the other side of the world for this arati. That's what I witnessed that evening was a very tall nun with full devotion, lovingly returning the day back to God. I believe in her silent movement, our beloved Viveka Prana carried all of us in her heart. As she worshiped with devotion, reverence, grace, and beauty. Even now, watching the memory of it gives me pause. In my heart, I knew I fell on my knees with devotional love. The sight of her reverence has never diminished. Thank you, Sarada Convent, for protecting this sacred space with your diligence and your watchful eye, serving us, the devotees, your brothers and sisters, loving us. Thank you from all of us. Thank you, Hollywood. Thank you, San Diego. Thank you, Tribuco. You have served us in a way that no other group possibly could. You let us stand beside you. You teach us through your actions, individually and together. Thanks. Thanks for letting me speak.
Paintings digitalized, so any of you can order them, Giclée. almost an original in your home. I think we may have to condense our reminiscences.
I'm gonna be short.
Just-
So this is what it looks like from up here. It says here, and I'm sure I wrote it, that when I came down the Santa Barbara Temple steps in December of 1967, that's an estimate. All I know is that Sergeant Pepper was out, you know. June of 67, so it's sometime in there, you know. But after having heard a first Vedanta lecture from Swami Vandananda on principle and personality, I was very impressed with the Swami. He seemed to be experiencing that of which he spoke. At that time, Shuddha Prana had a card table set up at the bottom of the stairs outside with books on it, and that was the bookshop. I asked her if she would recommend any book, what would it be? She picked up the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and handed it to me. Such a big book. I opened the cover on the flyleaf and saw the price. I don't know how much it was then in 1967, but it was under $10, I think. What was it?
1995.
Really? In 67?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so I said, I browsed through it a little and saw some of the pictures, then handed it back to her saying that I would have to get it when I had more money. You know, it was the 60s, you're living kind of on the skid, you know. So she handed it back to me, and she said, just take it, you can pay us later. And I thought, really? You know, I mean, really? Then I said, you know, I have the strangest feeling that I already know all of you. This temple and this place. And she said, well, of course you know all of us. I'd come on the back of a flatbed farm truck with a bunch of others, about 8 or 6 of us, you know, and I saw they were getting ready to leave, so I held up the book and said, thank you. When we all got back to the A-frame house on Banana Road, where we shared a house, about 6 of us, I immediately went to my cot in the dorm bedroom, I guess you'd call it, sat cross-legged and began reading the book. Bingo. It was revealed to me, and I mean in a way that is not just intellectual, but revealed to me as an experience, that Ramakrishna was an avatar, like Christ, except here we could read what he said directly. I would be going back to that temple. And anyway, I needed to pay for the book. Shuddhaprana's kind gesture changed my life. It would never be the same again. Why did it seem I already knew all these people? At some point in those earliest days, I started coming all the time, hitchhiking over here, walking. I'd loaned my car to somebody who left it by the side of the road on the way to Fresno. So I would come over here as I could. And there was a sort of unwritten rule that if you wanted to come to lunch and be closer to the Swamis, then it was expected that you would do some work, karma yoga in the morning before that. So I came over, especially on the weekends, and always would work and hopefully get invited to lunch. And I was heading down from the temple here, doing something up here, across the parking lot, and that little road, that leads around going to the driveway. And out popped Mangala, who was then a brahmacharini, would later become Shakti Prana. And she said, "Ha ha, I beat you." Why did we both know what she meant? She had come to Vedanta before me, this time. Of course, it was unusual in the sense of still remembering it today, but strangely, it didn't seem unusual at the time. As if it was what we all knew subliminally, and yet, who knew where or when? So my earliest experience of the convent seemed to be a faint memory, or déjà vu. In the same way a person in a family might return after a long absence, everything came so easily then. An open door of mutual acceptance. However subjective that experience may have been to rational doubt, it was the experience I was actually having. And in these two statements by nuns, it seemed to be something recognized by others as well. What I knew for certain was that I had found my peeps. And just one other little statement. When I went to one of those first lunches over at 886 here, that was the monastery retreat house, and I was able to go to lunch with Swami Vandanananda. I asked him, okay, what's the Vedanta take on déjà vu? Because I was having this experience. And before I sound too woo-woo, I think all of us have a common experience like this, where we meet people who are going to play a significant role in our lives, and we recognize them. We have some intimation that we may have known them before. And, here it is, 55 years later, and we're doing it, And they've been in my life all this time, whether it's been up or down, they've always been in my heart. Just like a touchstone, you always know that they're there, a kind of symbol of your highest and noblest aspirations. So I asked Swami Vandananda what was deja vu, the Vedanta take on it. And he said, well, there are two accepted theories, and both are true, and may be experienced independently or together. So then he explained to me what those two theories were, and I thought, wow, kid in a candy store. I mean, they have a plausible explanation for things like you've been thinking about your whole life. And this it's an amazing culture. So, if you want to know what those two theories were, catch me after this, because I don't want to go on and on here.
I'm going to say, when we read the excerpts from people, we may shorten them a bit more. These will all be available. The complete reminiscence, like Ralph's complete reminiscence, will be online. These people have written them out. So next we'll have Pravrajika Seva Prana reading Judy Blanco, Deepti, and Pavitra. And if you can shorten them even just a little more, Seva Prana. Because otherwise we're going to be here until 6. Which I'd love to see you here, but I don't think so.
Okay, so I have 3 I'm reading. Judy Blanco. When we first visited the Hollywood Temple, we were blessed to meet Swami Prabhavananda. We soon became acquainted with the sisters of the Sarada Convent, and they live a distance from us in the desert, but they welcomed me into Holy Mother's home. And it's been my blessing to be able to spend time with these loving spiritual sisters and Pravrajikas. And I also met Yoga Prana, Ananda Prana, Sarada Prana, Bhakti Prana, and Viveka Prana, and each one shared unique gifts of love and light. Sri Sarada Devi said, "Our root is love alone. Out of love alone, the Master's family has grown up, and I am their mother." So that's a shortened version of...
As I say, that's available online.
Okay.
Thank you.
So... the next one is where it went. Deepti. Deepti, she starts out with one about Pravrajika Sarada Prana. Deepti was a nun for some time in Hollywood. She came in the 1970s. Sarada Prana said someone in Chicago told her to contact Tantine, Josephine McLeod. And so she wrote to Tantine, who advised her, if you want to know more about this philosophy, the person to see is Swami Prabhavananda in California. And so she packed her bags and went to California. And she was beyond the age that probationer, and she also had been married, and she had a child. But she was widowed, And she was told she could never be a nun or take vows, but that didn't deter her. She went right on studying and becoming a member of the ashram. And her son was old enough that he went and lived in Trabuco with the monks. And he actually graduated from the university and prospered as a businessman. And although she was told she could never take vows, she actually did take vows. And her name, Sarada Prana, means the power of faith. She had her share of health issues, and she almost lost her hearing at one point because she'd been out with some people and someone had shot a gun very near her ear, so she was almost deaf for quite some time, but she never spoke negatively about this accident. And she also almost lost her sight because she overworked and she was reading a whole lot, and that also she regained. And she returned to her work in the bookstore, and she Deepti says that she went in search of someone to serve, and although she was able to serve Swami Prabhupada some, she sort of attached herself to Sarada Prana, and she said she learned a tremendous amount from her of how to read a book, how to, check the indexes and all the things that she had learned in the publishing. And she used it later. And she was very regular in her meditation. And in this, she talked about how one time coming back from a medical appointment, she was sitting in the car and she was projecting this stillness and peace. And she began describing spiritual life as getting on a train that is going to a specific destination. And it goes through all kinds of landscapes. But no matter what happens, you stay on the train. And I can still see her intense blue eyes as she says again and again, with all the traffic swirling around us, don't get off the train, don't get off the train. So the next one is Pavitra, some of her reminiscences. She joined the Hollywood Convent in 1975 first, and she had her 21st birthday a few weeks after that. And at that time, Yoga Prana, Ananda Prana, Bhakti Prana, Sarada Prana, and Gauri Prana were all there. Gauri Prana was the youngest, and Swami said that the first sign that you're becoming religious is that you become cheerful. And she was the epitome of cheerfulness. She had a beautiful smile that lit up the room. And she would always meet you with that bright smile and cheerful attitude. Sarada Prana had a heart of gold. She was always looking for the underdog. And she wrote regularly to inmates in the prison system and tried to encourage them, even when she couldn't hear or see well. But she was determined to do her work in the convent, and she was an avid reader and would read books for the inclusion in the catalog and bookstore. She was our mystic, says Deepti. She had a lot of spiritual dreams and visions, and on rare occasions she would share those. Bhakti Prana was a unique individual. She was totally guileless. She was also very much by the book. She was a musician and had studied violin at Juilliard. And I can't forget her leading the choir and the faces she used to pull to get us to try to do the things that we would get the giggles. Deepti and I would be sitting there and we'd both of us get the giggles. Anyway, she was very unique. Later in life, Bhakti Prana had problems with her knees that made it hard for her to walk up and down the hill to the temple. But she would try to always get there. And in fact, at one period of her life, she would drive down so that she could get to the temple regularly and on time. And Deepti says, one day I overheard her mumbling to herself, Pavitra, mumbling to herself, and it turns out she was talking to Sri Ramakrishna. She was telling him her troubles and complaining about the things she didn't understand. I was amazed. After all, to whom can we really tell our problems besides God? Our most senior nun was Yoga Prana, and she didn't rule the convent, rather she guided it with love and extreme gentleness. She rarely put herself forward, but had opinions when asked. She never scolded, but talked to us gently and reminded us of our goals and ideals. And of the senior nuns, Ananda Prana was the one that she said she spent the most time with and had great admiration for. She kind of led the convent and held us together. She was very intelligent, well-read, logical, and provided me with a sense of guidelines with which to mold my monastic life. She supported me when I was down and encouraged me when I did well. The quality in Ananda Prana that impressed and inspired me the most was her renunciation. Those who knew her knew that she gave up a family to join the convent, and I once asked her how could she do it. Most of us came young and didn't have that much to give up. She just smiled, quoting Swamiji, said, real renunciation is renunciation of the ego. You have to know that when you decide to join the convent, your life is no longer your own.
Okay, so now it seems to be, I am reading a couple of reminiscences. We have, okay. I'll be reading a couple of reminiscences if I can see them. Jnana Prana. Jnana Prana was living in the convent when I first moved in. What she has written is she visited the convent in 1964 when moving from New York to Berkeley. Being introduced to convent life was such a wonderful experience. Right away it felt like home. I'm grateful to Prabha Prana, Borda Prana, Shuddha Prana, Shakti Prana, and Swami Prabhavananda for their love and encouragement for me to join, which I did in 1967. Coming from a devotee family made the transition easier. The teachings of Swami Prabhavananda came once a month to lecture and share his time with us and the devotees. I still remember Swami's classes on the crest jewel of discrimination. He made one feel that the goal was in the palm of your hand. Convent life had the magic of making me even more aware. The teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Sarada Devi, and Swami Vivekananda have been my anchor and blessing. They demonstrate the way. Now, Patrice Handley came about the same time. Ralph, Vrajaprana, me, we all came around the same time. She wrote, 3 of us came to the temple in Santa Barbara out of curiosity. We'd heard that there were swamis in colorful robes there. We arrived on a Sunday in time for a lecture by Swami Prabhavananda. It was the late 60s, and we were decked out in love beads and flowers in our hair. I even had bells sewn onto my skirts. Shuddha Prana sat at a little card table by the steps selling books, candles, incense, and such. She smiled and welcomed us warmly. It was love at first sight for all of us. The temple was packed. Swami Pavitrananda was speaking, and Swami Prabhavananda sat on a little bench nearby. So we seated ourselves on the stairs beneath him. It probably would have been right here. Little did we know that we were sitting at the feet of the man who would become the most influential person in our lives, our guru. That first time at the temple, we met a young girl. She was radiant after the lecture. Something had hit her like a starburst. She later became a devotee, then Uma, then our beloved Viveka Prana. Actually, the starburst hit all of us, and we began our spiritual journey surrounded by the caring, kind, humorous, wonderful nuns at the convent. I consider them my best friends. They have held my hand through many travails, as well as celebrating my victories for over 50 years. Because of their quiet, loving guidance, my family have all become Vedanta devotees. My children and grandchildren giving baby blessings by Borda Prana and Krishna Prana over the years. The Sarada Convent and the Santa Barbara Temple is our spiritual home, and we are very, very grateful. Mukti, Valerie Bentz came. I will read a brief edition of her. It's very, very interesting. You'll have to get it online. I first started attending the Vedanta Temple in Santa Barbara shortly after I moved to Santa Barbara from Denton, Texas. I had always been interested in Indian thought and was pleased to discover the 11 a.m. Sunday lectures. What inspired me to come regularly was one Easter Sunday, when a friend and I decided to attend first the Unity Church and follow this up by a lecture by one of the Swamis in Santa Barbara Temple. The Unity Church service featured very friendly greetings and required hugs between those attending and features positive messages. By contrast, at the Vedanta Temple, the Swami said right at the beginning of his talk, "Life is suffering." I immediately felt an affinity with Vedanta, as that is the truth. I remember Borda Prana, the composer of the lovely songs based on Vedanta teachings as well. Also, I appreciated Ananda Prana, who was very wise and had lived for some time at the Hollywood Temple. Both died some years back. I had thought seriously twice, once about 1998 and again in 2008, of becoming a nun myself. Okay. I always felt moved by the presence of Bhava Prana, whom I knew over the years. I also felt the wonderful presence of Vajra Prana and Krishna Prana, who I still see as my sisters of the heart and soul. Also the loving presence of Devi Prana, who was always in the bookstore. I was deeply moved upon being invited to lunch with one of the nuns not so long ago. Vajra Prana expressed joy that I was there at home after a long hiatus of not visiting due to COVID. I look at being in the kitchen and the dining room of the convent as the center of my home of the heart. And as I say, you can have the others. Now, I'm not going to give you any of my own personal ones. We'll have the Hollywood Bhajan group sing now. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Now, Kali Dasi will be reading Jayanti, Amala, and also giving a few of her own reminiscences.
This is Pamela Hoy, or Jayanti, and it's entitled Unexpected Treasure, a Devotee Living in San Diego. My Methodist background had succeeded in skewing my understanding of monastic life. Upon my tentative embrace of Vedanta as my spiritual home, this would be corrected first through Swami Swahananda telling me to make friends with the monastics. As if Mother had heard him, or perhaps it was she who spoke through him, I was frequently able to visit Hollywood and Santa Barbara, and often stayed at either convent during my early years as a devotee. Considering that I am what is usually considered severely disabled and live in San Diego, this is rather amazing. And the monastics, rather than being strange, cookie-cutter beings striving to hide out in some idyllic community, I met strong, unique individuals who were by no means seeking escape. One doesn't avoid life's challenges in the monastic setting. If so blessed, one encounters these head-on in pursuit of something higher and more fulfilling. In making friends with the monastics, I learned that not only is spiritual truth real, but we must also begin living to experience this reality from exactly where we are. What is needed is a longing and a desire to do so. I had come to Vedanta after feeling that I was done with the world. As my own identification shifted from my body, I found myself engaged and doing more than I had ever imagined possible. I realized that while my lifelong spiritual longing was genuine, my renunciation had come from socialization. I had learned the ordinary expectations and approaches to life with the opposing message that I did not fit in because of my physical limitations. After several years of shelter and learning from the example of monastic friends, Mother sent me again to experience the world, this time to begin from where I am, from the perspective of Vedanta. Memories flood in as many individual nuns, past and present, arise in mind. Most clear in my memory, however, is my time with Viveka Prana. I see her sitting at the end of the dining table, me at the side. I realize now that it was likely her being senior in age that allowed me to spend time with her while others were busy with various tasks. My own speech impairment, coupled with her hearing loss, made for a one-sided conversation, yet I listened intently. Interesting details from her life blended with and accentuated aspects of spiritual life itself. A lifelong seeker who had found my spiritual home, I was gladly soaking everything in. Writing had served as my means of communication since I had learned to type using a mouth-held stick at age 10. Thus, it was natural for me to write to Viveka Prana after my first visit, initiating what would be a year and a half of correspondence. Her metaphor of spiritual life being like a spiral staircase has remained with me, giving encouragement in many situations, such as when learned lessons present themselves anew, or when the mistake you are trying to stop making seems to repeat in spite of your best and earnest effort, when the mind absolutely refuses to calm down and allow one to focus, or when one's practice has become dry and seemingly bereft of meaning. As while climbing a spiral staircase, the spiritual aspirant periodically circles back for a bit to face where we have started from. With each go-around, our perspective changes as we are taken higher. With each go-around, likewise in spiritual life, however long our journey and no matter how often we seem to circle back, we are always going forward along the path leading to greater clarity and realization. This is Amala's reminiscences. I came to Hollywood Temple 54 years ago when I was 19 years old, curious about the teachings I had heard from friends who were Vedantists. I joined the convent in Santa Barbara a few years later. Why? Well, it seemed kind of simple to me. If the purpose of life was to realize God, what better place than with others of like mind and aspirations? Pico Prana was our Mother Superior, convent administrator, confidant of many devotees, and a strong, gracious adjunct to Swami Prabhavananda. Pico Prana oversaw the young nuns as we were trained in the various schedules and duties that were necessary to keep the convent, temple, and bookshop grounds in good order and running smoothly. She also encouraged us in intellectual pursuits and spiritual practices. Pico Prana had high standards, expectations, and the ear of Swami Prabhavananda. Sometimes we wouldn't see eye to eye, but I felt she had my best interest and the convent's best interest at the forefront of her actions. Pico Prana was firm, fair, and caring. She always made time to visit with the many devotees who sought her out. I also can't think of Pico Prana without thinking of her pet rabbit, Miss Boo. Viveka Prana was a remarkably stoic person, shy and unassuming. Her love of music as our choir director, a musical director, demonstrated a spirited dedication, writing much of the original music still sung today. She also played several musical instruments and was a skilled cultivator of orchids, growing exquisite varieties with loving care in the greenhouse for pujas and other celebrations. Viveka Prana was the main pujarini for special celebrations and homophiles. She always appeared to me to be a very contented person, with simple needs, happy in her love of music, her flowers, and her convent life. I was trained by other young nuns regarding the work schedules, maintenance of the grounds, everything from arranging flowers in the temple shrine to laying concrete slab. The routine, discipline, physical labor, classes, and spiritual practices bonded us as a community. We were allowed to pursue interests that benefited our community, such as music, painting, photography, writing, calligraphy, mechanics, or gardening. We also took special trips from time to time. A favorite memory is visiting Swami Sheshananda at the Vedanta Portland Center, staying at the Caboose retreat after an unexpectedly eventful road trip from Santa Barbara to Portland with 3 of my sisters. Another trip was to Death Valley with 9 of us in an old station wagon, nearly running out of gas on our way back because we refused to pay an outrageous 50 cents a gallon for fuel in the valley. We shared many other things, an espresso in the bookstore kitchen, a 5-mile hike into Montecito, controlled brush burning on the property, poison oak outbreaks, Christmas caroling at the Jesuit monastery, marathon cookie and bread making, yard sales, and an abundance of laughter. We also shared a love for one another. I left the convent after 9 years, and 40 years later, I can definitely say the years living in the convent were the most formative of my life. It grounded me spiritually with a broad, open outlook that has continuously guided my relationships, work, and dealings with many facets of a messy world. It is what still anchors me to Vedanta and the nuns who remain today, a shared experience, a shared ideal, and the knowledge that we are each unique in our chosen path. I smilingly tell the nuns the words of the 1977 song, Hotel California, that sums it all up for me. You can check out at any time you like, but you can never leave. Amala's reminiscences give an insight into the daily lives of the monastics of the Sarada Convent some 40 years ago. I can speak today of today and the 20-plus years I've been coming to the temple. I first met Krishna Prana through a mutual friend and longtime devotee at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning, and we soon formed a habit of meeting early for coffee before the market opened. Getting to know Krishna Prana over drinking coffee together every Saturday morning for half an hour, I became intrigued how this seemingly normal, bright, well-informed, outgoing lady was a nun, and a Hindu one at that. I had no idea there was such a thing. And in Montecito? Curious to check this out further, I visited the temple and was immediately struck by the beauty and tranquility of this place, which drew me in so much so that I found myself attending lectures and pujas on a regular basis. After a while, I realized that the beauty and tranquility that had drawn me in owed a great deal to the efforts of the nuns of the Sarada Convent, who maintain this large piece of property with its many buildings. I was struck by how hard they worked. I witnessed stove cleaning day, when they all got together to scrub the stove clean, usually after cooking for 200 or more people at Durga Puja. Nuns clean the temple toilets. They clean the guest house and the pavilion for retreat days. They work in the grounds, weeding, planting, and clearing brush. Besides all this physical labor at the Sarada Convent, nuns perform worship in 2 shrines twice a day, every day, perform pujas and homafars, hold gospel and scriptural readings. This is just a sample of what they all do here. And then Viveka Prana and Krishna Prana have lecture schedules, both here and at other centers. In spite of how busy they are, I found the nuns very welcoming to devotees, often inviting them to lunch to get to know them better. If they know that a devotee is sick and unable to come to a puja, they will send them prasad or take it to them themselves. Once a month, they will shop and cook at Transition House, a local shelter. When I was very sick and in hospital, they visited me and looked after me while I recovered. Seeing all this activity firsthand and being blessed with a fair amount of energy and time on my hands at this juncture of life, I offered to help out the bookstore and relieve the nuns of that job once a week. Well, as it turns out, this was way more beneficial to me than it was to the Sarada Convent. As I sat there waiting for customers, I started to read the books on the shelves. And so began my study of Vedanta scriptures. As I finished one book and commented on it to Viveka Prana, who buys all the books in the store, she would suggest another. Saturday morning coffee time with Krishna Prana also afforded further book recommendations. The more I read, it awakened in me a realization that this was the truth I had known all along. I'd found my way home. I feel enormous love and gratitude to the nuns of the Sarada Convent for the example they have shown me of selfless service and dedication to spiritual ideals. My association with them has shown me a wonderful path forward and given me great opportunity for giving service, which has incidentally been a lot of fun and given me great joy. Thank you, ladies of the Sarada Convent.
Okay. Next, we will have Pravajika Vrajapana, and she'll be reading reminiscence of Monica Babbage, Leanne Engel, and Sunanda, and some of her own. And then Annie will come up as soon as Vajraprana is finished, Annie Bardock. Okay?
Hold on. Somehow it got lost here. I wanted to speak a little bit about Border Prana. She came in 1943 to Hollywood after reading the Gospel of Ramakrishna, and there was a little thing in there for further information. And said, so she wrote to Swami Nikhilananda for further instruction, and he said, you already have a Vedanta society in Hollywood and a Swami there, so that's how she started coming. She wanted to join immediately, but her parents wouldn't allow it. So when she turned 21, she moved in. As you heard already, she was a fine musician, a wonderful composer. Most of the songs you hear here on a Sunday are hers. She was also a wonderful gardener. She was also terribly, terribly shy. So the best way to understand Border Prana was to actually listen to her music. That's the best way that you understood her personality, her philosophy, and her attitude. What was amazing with her is she loved puja. She actually studied puja in India with the legendary Swami Hitananda, who wrote the book Worship of Sri Ramakrishna. And she trained us, all of us, in puja and homa fire for generations of nuns. She loved India. I was blessed to go twice with her. And really, she was the happiest when she was in India. Nothing disturbed her, nothing. It was no matter how sick everybody got, no matter what difficulties, happy as a clam. She kind of walked over, her feet never touched the ground. She especially loved Bellarmine and Varanasi. That was her place. She was so quiet, you could never hear her walk in a door. She was like a cat walking in. You would never hear her close a cabinet, which was kind of interesting because contrasting that, she had a really girlish giggle when something struck her funny. So in India, we did a lot of giggling. She was very self-effacing, never stood on her own seniority, was so happy to be out there in the garden, just digging along with the rest of us, chopping things or doing simple work. She once told me about convent living. You know, the first 50 years are the hardest. And I looked to see if she was kidding. She wasn't. It was a simple matter of fact. Okay. She had Alzheimer's for years, but she continued to go regularly to the temple no matter what. It was a lifetime habit. She was a nun for 70 years, 70 years. That is a commitment, baby. So one day she was coming up to the temple, and it was afternoon, and Jim Witherall was here, and he said, "Hey, Border Prana, it's a little early for Vespers." And she looked at her watch quizzically and said, "Can you set my watch for Vespers?" Throughout her long Alzheimer's, her shyness disappeared. She became demonstratively loving, as she always was, but she never was able to express it. To understand Border Prana best is to listen to her music, and I'll end with a quote from one of her songs. "O Ramakrishna, Lord of our hearts, you came to give us liberation. You are the avatar of our age. We crave your grace and mercy. Protect us who have taken refuge in thee, O Ramakrishna." And now I'd like to say a few words about Bhava Prana. Bhava Prana joined in 1975, and she passed away only last year in October 21st, 2021. She was a fine cellist. She was also a published cytologist, one of those people who look at cancer cells through a microscope, and she loved little tiny details, which was great when she started her own darkroom here. And she developed photos for almost all the Vedanta societies in this country. She was a purist. She never photoshopped. She never did anything like that. She said, everything is in the photo. You just bring it out. So she patiently went through every detail, bringing out the most perfect photos. She was very shy, but she always conveyed an enormous amount of warmth and real empathy. She had a wonderful, hearty laugh, which was wonderful because it was so sincere and it was so free. She was one of the convent's best writers, and she wrote a number of articles for Vedanta publications. And though she had a lifelong stammer, it was the biggest obstacle in her life, she overcame it. And she gave beautiful, thoughtful lectures in the temple. And it was a real accomplishment, and one she was justly proud of. She taught herself HTML. Who does this? It's like she wanted to learn coding so she could create our Vedanta.org website. She did, with a book, how to code, how to learn HTML. She did it. And so she created our 120-page website from scratch, zero, nothing. She also got on the project before there was ever such a thing as a website, before there was such a thing as Google. We had a convent project which she organized to type in the entire complete works. So 4 of us in the convent typed, 3 of us, and then Viveka Prana proofread the entire complete works, which formed the database which a lot of people used to be able to find quotes from Swami Vivekananda. She loved children, and she was happiest when she could be with a bunch of kids. That was her glory time. Second to that, cats, especially kittens. But really, the focus of her life was Swami Vivekananda. So what was interesting is when she got, when she had her photos, she had abbreviations. We had so many photos, so many different poses and varieties. We'd have RK for Sri Ramakrishna, SD for Sri Sarada Devi, and you'd have RK1, RK50, RK30, SV1 through 40, SB for Swami Brahmananda. Everything was abbreviated so you could find it. So when she got Alzheimer's, I needed to have her signature on something. So I went over to her place and said, "Hey, Viveka Prana, can you, I want to give her a piece of paper first, see if it would work. It's like, can you sign your name?" She got her pen, she's left-handed, wrote something. I said, "Okay, great." I looked at it, SV for Swami Vivekananda. A magnificent identification. So, despite her long Alzheimer's, her personality didn't change. She was loving and deeply empathetic until the very end. And now I'll say reflections from Monica. Tim and I practiced yoga since college, and at some point I found myself reading more and more about yoga philosophy, and it resonated with me. Also, I found that as I experienced suffering, and the hardships of life, Vedantic principles were, for me, the easiest to consider and apply to actually feel better. Although I found great similarities in its practical application to Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, ultimately, it was my belief in Atman and Brahman that led me to my home at Vedanta. When Tim and I moved our family to Santa Barbara in 2013, I remember honing in on the temple and looking forward to the time when our children would be old enough to attend Sunday school so that we could partake in the lectures. So when we started attending, we found the experience deeply enriching. The lectures would set the tone for the day, and we would find something to think about all day. She said in the early days, the children loved the routine of walking with Stephen, they would plant bulbs, and later with Viveka Prana, and later still with Durga, to pick flowers and offer at the shrine, saying their prayers and their intentions, and circling back to the convent to pet Rosie, the dog, read the comics, and finish up some cookies. We found the temple a grounding influence in our lives, and the nuns, with the joy and the goodness they embodied, the golden thread. Now that we've moved out of the area, there's definitely a big hole in our lives. We miss that special ambiance, the stillness, the warm and inviting wood of the temple columns amidst the love and the wisdom that resounded within those walls and fed our souls. And now one from Sunanda, Diane Sagan, who's in Irvine. In the summer of 1963, I was a 20-year-old girl home in Santa Barbara between my 2 years in a Midwestern girls' college and going off to San Francisco Art Institute. I was looking to lead a bohemian life after the closely controlled life I had lived. I'd given up my adolescent fantasy of entering a Catholic convent and also altogether given up any desire to become a Catholic. So I spent that summer sunbathing on Butterfly Beach. At the same time, several Sarada Convent nuns were there, entertaining the younger sister of one of them. We sat on the sand near each other and soon got to know each other. These were Vijali, Sarada, Shuddha Prana, and Shakti Prana. When I shared with them my idea of happiness, I soon got an education about what true happiness is. I was invited to visit the convent and was given suggestions of books, all of which made so much sense to me. In fall, I went to art school in San Francisco and met my future husband, who just happened to have a copy of Vedanta for Modern Man in his glove compartment, which sealed my interest in him. We were married, had a daughter, and frequently returned to Santa Barbara, where I was initiated by Swami Prabhavananda in 1967. I spent many happy visits with the nuns in Santa Barbara over the years. I was given the privilege of making the image of Kali for 3 years, learning the technique from a nun in Santa Barbara. Over the years, I spent many visits at the convent. I learned to cook for the Lord, collected many recipes, both Indian and others, was blessed to walk the Lord's tray down to the shrine and participate in the life of the convent. Besides the spiritual blessing of holy company, I learned that monastic life is often full of fun. One evening, we all climbed into the little TV room to watch the movie The Ruddles. I treasure the time I've spent at Sarada Convent. And I'll now end with Leanne's reminiscence. The sisters at Sarada Convent were my first contact with Vedanta and the biggest reason I kept coming back to the Santa Barbara Temple. The view from the temple veranda was beautiful, and I was happy to provide my then 4-year-old daughter a spiritual foundation. And, of course, there were the Swami's thought-provoking lectures. But it was the nuns who drew me back every Sunday. They would greet me in the most natural way, as if they'd known me for years. And yet, they would always take time to get to know me better. There was an immediate openness in our interreactions, and I felt that I hadn't felt it any time before. Early on, I remember talking to Krishna Prana after one of the lectures. I can't remember what we were discussing, and as soon as I stood there looking at her, I realized there was something much bigger happening than just our friendly exchange. I wanted to understand more about what I had just felt, and so from that point on, the Sunday lectures and the nuns became a constant both in my life and my daughter's life. I'm always curious to know what they've been up to, and our conversations are consistently filled with humor and valuable perceptions. But I'm attracted to more than that. I'm drawn to them because they are living Ramakrishna's and Holy Mother's teachings and making them practical and accessible to me. 18 years later, and even though now I live 1,500 miles away, the sisters are still a huge part of my life, and I look forward to every chance I get to be in their company. It's always an experience filled with loads of insights and lots of laughter. I'm so grateful they're in my life. Thank you.
You couldn't miss Ananda Prana. Though a nun, rather petite and conservative in style, she was a snappy dresser. Ananda Prana knew loss in her bones. A German-born refugee who fled the Nazis with her parents, she had been battered by loss. Hers was a wealthy, cultured family, but they were Jews. They escaped Berlin with their lives on one of the last boats allowed out. She joined the Hollywood Order in 1952, where she lived for 30 years before moving to the Montecito Center, where she lived and worked for another 30 plus years. That's more than 60 years of conscious living. Hers was a life of full renunciation. She had left a marriage, a child, and had lost a country. She also chose not to pursue full recovery of her family's vast fortune and properties. A polyglot, a accomplished editor, and indefatigable worker, Anandaprana became the private secretary of Swami Prabhavananda, the founder of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. Now, in the monastic world, Swami P, as he was called, was a rock star. No less than, say, Nikhilananda in Manhattan. Not just Aldous Huxley, Christopher Isherwood, but the likes of like Igor Stravinsky and Greta Garbo came to the Hollywood Center to hear his talks and seek initiation or his counsel. And like all rock stars, Swami P needed a gatekeeper. Enter Anandaprana, who, as some of you know, when needed, could summon her Teutonic DNA. But who ensured that Swami P had the time for his writings, his research, and numerous collaborations with Isherwood, who often cited Anandaprana's great help to him, notably in his work, Ramakrishna and his disciples. Anandaprana was at the center of all the Vedanta Society's literary activities, editing the magazine Vedanta for the West for many years, as well as editing Swami Prabhavananda's Sermon on the Mount, according to Vedanta. She is also the author of a remarkable account, a history and the teachings of her guru. It is quite the masterwork. I recall my first reading of it and then saying to her, Anandaprana, you never have to do another thing ever again. And she shrugged. To our great fortune, Brahma Prana, who used to be here, has seen to it that it has been properly published a few years ago, entitled The Light to the West. I recommend it. Not everything, however, made it into the book. Anandaprana saw and heard a lot in Hollywood, it being Hollywood. But she was the soul of discretion. Once we were chatting about Aldous Huxley and his two very different wives and later infatuation with psychedelics. Anandaprana offered some choice words on the second wife, then put her hand to her heart and said, Swami P said once, oh, Aldous, he's such a brilliant man. Few can rival him. Then he said sadly, but he lacks discrimination. Was a great rendering by her. I remember her saying to me about Swami Swahananda, he's funny, he loves politics, and he seems informal, but he's deep, very deep. She passed away on December 29th, 2014, an observer saying, it looks like she melted into something really beautiful. I was not surprised. Her favorite piece of scripture came from Shankara's Crestual Discrimination. My mind fell like a hailstone into that vast expanse of Brahman's ocean. Touching one drop of it, I melted away and became one with Brahman. Thank you.
All right, Amrita, would you come up and do your reminiscence? I just heard that Devi Prana won't be doing it. She'd rather tape it and have it later. Okay, and then Durga will come down and read reminiscences of Sherry Shanks' Sarada, who is the singer from the Gret Center, Lolly Molly, and Sita Mitchell. So after you.
In 1972, my two sisters, both devotees, and myself visited the Santa Barbara Convent for 3 days. I had only met two swamis briefly before this experience, and it was strange being at the convent. I was both intrigued and confused by all the discussion at the dining room table about Thakur, Mother, Maharaj, this Swami, or that Swami. Later, I learned that this is what devotees of God like to do. Talk about their gurus or their gurus' gurus or God. I moved to Hollywood in September 1978 to serve my guru, Swami Swahananda, and moved near Santa Barbara in 1991, which provided lots of opportunity to work and know both the Hollywood and Santa Barbara nuns. When I moved to Hollywood, the women devotees ate lunch at the Hollywood Convent every Saturday, with Gauri Prana enthusiastically cooking for the group. One year, around Christmas, they decided to do a play. I remember that Gauri Prana was Mary, and Sarada Prana, then Nirmala, was God, dressed in a long white sheet that looked like a rope. But the best actor was our dear Bhakti Prana. She playfully dressed up and was Lord Shiva. She wore a leotard and tights and had a wig on and a rubber snake wrapped around her left arm, holding something that was supposed to be a trident and dancing. We so enjoyed her Shiva Bhava and laughed about it for years. I was fortunate to associate with the senior nuns in Hollywood. Yoga Prana was not very talkative, at least not to me, but once she told me a story about an incident when she and brother were driving back to Hollywood from Laguna Beach. They saw a sign for a palmist, and Krishnananda pulled his Cadillac into the parking lot, and they went inside this little shack. The woman had a heavy Eastern European accent and kept looking at the crystal ball and finally said, "You live a very, very strange life. For $5, I can change all of that." They left without paying a cent, and as they entered the car, Krishnananda, in his incredibly quick humor, said to Yoga Prana, "Give me your Om, and I will give you a home." She always laughed when she told that story. Once Yoga Prana told me about how she was sure that she was going to realize God in 5 years. I think she was really trying to encourage me to be patient. She also spoke about how some people think they can do lots of japa when they're sick, but you can't. I love Sarada Prana and used to just enjoy being in her holy company. She had a beautiful twinkle in her eye, and you felt that she could see and feel deeply within you. Having lost her hearing in one ear, she often felt that she was missing out on important things that were discussed at the dining table. I felt that she was lucky she didn't have to hear everything that was discussed, sometimes over and over again. Bhakti Prana didn't seem to listen, or else she couldn't hear what was said at the dining room table, and usually asked for the subject under discussion to be repeated again and again. At the time when Ananda Prana was living in Hollywood and running the catalog business in the Hollywood Convent garage, I was assisting her one week when Pavitra was away. One day I came up to the garage and she pointed to a roll of toilet papers that I had mistakenly brought up to the counter where we packed the books. She told me she had not put them away so I would know the mistake I had made. Another day, she mentioned that she had asked Swami P., who had written that poorly written book about Nag Mahasai, and he replied he had. We both laughed a lot about that. When I moved to Carpinteria, I had association, of course, with the nuns here, as I had for many years. And once I came up from Hollywood, even before I moved here, and spent a weekend, which happened to have been over my birthday. So the nuns, as a treat to me and themselves, we had croissants. And the guest Swami at that time was Swami Nitya Sarupananda, who was visiting that weekend. And he was amazed that we were celebrating a birthday, like acknowledging that we were a body, not just focusing in on the Atman. He didn't really appreciate that. I remember another time when Swami Swahananda was complimenting, he was at the dining room table here in Santa Barbara, and he was looking at some tray, and he said, "What is this?" And somebody commented, "Oh, Viveka Prana made it. She was at the table." And he looked, "My name's on there," she said, or somebody said, and he lifted this tray up, he looked out underneath. He was amazed that she had the skills to make this pewter or something plate. Okay, so another day, it is interesting to note that all of the nuns who have entered care facilities have remained calm and loving under all circumstances. They always appreciated visits of the devotees. There was no complaining, rather acceptance and surrender. We see this every time we visit Devi Prana. It proves Vedanta really works. For the last 50 years, I've enjoyed and benefited from my long association with the members of the convent. Now, more than ever, I really enjoy hearing the reminiscences of the monks and the nuns we've known over the years, or of the direct disciples. I enjoy cooking together for pujas and special events, laughing and sharing together and enjoying their holy company. I respect their regular habits, renunciation, and lifestyle, and I admire their commitment to serving others and realizing God, the twin ideals of the order. Thank you.
So the first reminiscence that I'm reading is from Sherry Shanks in Texas. I am writing to share my appreciation of the Dallas-Fort Worth Vedanta Center and their resident minister, Viveka Prana. I have appreciated the kind hospitality of all members of the center each time I have visited. I especially appreciate the kindness of Viveka Prana and her efforts to further interspiritual dialogue across the world religions. As a participant in the discussions, I have learned much through discussion with her and the other participants. Her wisdom, wit, and compassion have meant a great deal to me on my journey. Thanks so much for this opportunity to share, and congratulations on the Diamond Jubilee. And this is from Sarada from the Gretz Center. Pravrajika Brahmaprana and I go a long way back. It was love at first bite when I met Mataji in our center Vedantique, where I am a monastic member since the mid-90s. Pravrajika Brahmaprana embodies courage, straightforwardness, fearlessness, and her lifelong experience is a source of inspiration for many spiritual seekers. God before everything, and with her, we're free, and I don't have to put my words on a scale before I speak them. Mataji stood by me when Swami Mohanandaji suddenly left this world and everything seemed empty. Brahmaprana has been fearless all her life. Her fearlessness shines through in her works and dedication wherever she goes, and wherever she is, she makes a difference. She shows influence from both Swamis Vivekananda and Brahmananda. I am blessed and proud to be her younger sister. I am proud that Mataji was one of the senior nuns allowed to use a scatter shotgun when necessary for the public's protection from rattlesnakes in the Wild West of the Santa Barbara Convent and Temple grounds. And the next one is from Lali Molly. In Sacramento, Swami Shraddhanandaji taught me to do the worship in the shrine. It was a 5-item puja with a lot of meditation. He told me that when you love to do the worship and feel Sri Ramakrishna is real and accepting your worship, then you are firm in spiritual life. When I joined Santa Barbara, I had to learn to perform the 10-item puja. I was given a binder of instructions and told to practice in the shrine in my room. When I had done that several times, I asked Pravrajika Bharatapranaji to test me. She came into my room and sat next to me and meditated while I did the worship at my shrine. When I finished the worship, she said I was ready to do the worship in the temple. When I asked her how she had learned to do the worship, she said she had learned in India. She told me that she had taught Swami Chaitanyanandaji to do worship. And the last one I'm reading is from Sita Mitchell. We came to Vedanta in 1968 after learning about the wonderful evening lectures that were given at the Hollywood Temple by Swami Vandanananda on the Bhagavad Gita. This was the purest of the spiritual offerings, and there were many we had already examined over 50 years ago, and it's still true today. After a time of attending classes and much study, we became members of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. As members, we wanted to experience all we could. One of our first visits to the Sarada Convent in Santa Barbara was to attend Durga Puja. What an amazing place. Such a beautiful temple on an incredible piece of land in the hills overlooking the ocean. The puja was a beautiful experience, but the graciousness of the nuns was what made us feel at home and very welcome, the beginnings of what was to become our now long treasured spiritual family. The nuns, both in Hollywood and Santa Barbara, were and are in charge of daily worship and puja preparations. So as young members eager to know how to help, we had them to guide us. It's the same today. The nuns help guide those interested in ways to participate and be of service. We vacuumed the temple and cleaned the bathrooms, and during puja season, we helped prepare the food for worship in the temple. It was such a joy to be of service and so closely involved. And Swami Prabhavananda, and later Swami Swahananda and Swami Sarvadevananda, would peek into the kitchen or wherever we were working to encourage us with approval and blessings, and often asking us to stay for lunch. Early on, we would occasionally be invited to lunch in Santa Barbara when Swami Prabhavananda was there. These were very special events because we were able to be with our guru in a small, quiet living room setting. We could talk and receive Swami's spiritual wisdom, heaven on earth. Once, when we arrived for lunch and Swami was sitting by himself in the living room, our friend said, "Oh, Swami, you're all alone." Swami said, as only he could, "I am never alone." The topic was changed. We were stunned into thoughtful silence and quietly waited to be called to the lunch table. Our times early on at the convents and dining with the Swamis were always a great treasure and spiritual adventure. Our nuns are such an essential and inspiring component of our times at the Vedanta temples. They show us how a life of spiritual practice and renunciation is to be lived, with grace, enthusiasm, joy, and forbearance. They offer their spiritual knowledge and experience, answering questions about scripture and practice, helping us along the path. Their efforts to create an inclusive family atmosphere have made the Vedanta spiritual experience feel more supportive and nurturing. We love our nuns. Congratulations on the 75th anniversary. Jai Ma.
Now we will have Priya Kulkarni come up, Jessica Gala, then Casey Krishnowski. Did I say it right? Okay. When Priya's finished, Jessica, please come up. Okay.
Pranams to respected Swami Sarvadevananda ji, to all the respected monks and nuns, and greetings to everyone in the audience.
It's a magic circle, 6 to 8 inches away from it.
Okay, is this better? A little closer. Okay.
Pull it up a bit.
Okay. My name is Priya Kulkarni, and it is my pleasure and honor to be here to celebrate the 75th year of this convent. Also coincides with the 75th Diamond Jubilee of India's independence. I have been associated with the convent for almost 18 years now. I was a graduate student here at the University of California, Santa Barbara when I first came to the Vedanta temple and was instantly attracted to the beautiful serene temple and the evening aartis and the pujas beautifully done, usually by Pravrajika Bhava Prana and Pravrajika Devi Prana. It was very different from the traditional temples I had visited in India or the Malibu Hindu temple, where most Indians found themselves when they missed India and other festivals back then. I got curious about the American woman dressed in the Indian Gerua, always walking purposefully, taking care of the premises, and with a friendly smile. So I started talking to them and learned about the Ramakrishna Math and Mission and Belur Math for the first time. Soon I started attending classes with Swami Sarvadevanandaji, who used to come from Hollywood on the weekends, and eventually met my guru, Swami Swahanandaji. Since then, this convent and the people here have been an integral part of my life, and good at bad times, like a true close family. As a 20-something coming to America, you think you know who you are, and you know what you want to do in life. You're here to live your American dream. Finding God is not on the list. The cross-cultural living slowly changes that, and you start losing your sense of identity, especially as a young woman coming to America from India. At this time, when I saw these beautiful, well-educated, well-to-do American women with no major life connection to India, living their whole lives centered around the ideals of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi, and Swami Vivekananda, looking very content and full of life, I was curious, actually more confused. Fortunately, in the next 5 to 7 years, I got to spend many weekends with my Guru Swami Swahanandaji and Swami Sarvadevanandaji at this campus, where Swahanandaji used to be more relaxed and less busy compared to the other centers. Leisurely walks with him discussing Vedanta philosophy, politics, life, and jokes, of course, many, many jokes, provided much clarity and conviction. And I had started attending my first Vedanta classes with Swami Sarvadevanandaji, and he was always very generous with our basic questions, and his firm faith and dependence on God was very magnetic. Over the years, I've got to spend more time with the convent by Mother's Grace and got to meet all the nuns. Pravrajika Viveka Prana was, I think, one of the senior nuns of the main 5 nuns. By the time I saw, she was very shy and quiet, and I think by the time I met her, she was already in the advanced stages of her Alzheimer's. But like on the clock, she would come to the temple for the arati and puja, which was amazing to me. And then it was Pravrajika Ananda Prana, who was also very friendly and one of the chatty ones, and she used to share a lot of stories of the convent. Pravrajika Bhava Prana was the forward-thinking one who had the vision to build the first Vedanta website, as you mentioned earlier, in the early 2000s. I watched her learn HTML and then go over every detail of the design and content of the website. I used to be her occasional test user on the website while I did the bookstore inventory with her. And Pravrajika's total reliance on God is evident in every little thing. Her quiet strength and faith in Holy Mother and her Guru Swami Aseshanandaji is inspiring. My weekly calls with her is something I really look forward to, and they're a highlight of my whole week. Pravrajika Vajraprana has been instrumental in spreading Vedanta ideas through her lectures and books, and has the uncanny ability to connect ancient Indian principles to American life today. So it's now easy whenever people in my friend circle ask me what is Vedanta, many of them mostly Indians, I just send your YouTube lectures to them. Pravrajika Krishna Prana is my true hero, being a predominantly Karma Yogi type myself. I think of her as a mini CEO and Holy Mother in action. Cooking with her in the kitchen is my favorite satsang, where I get to hear many stories of Swami P while I learn some neat cooking tricks. Over the years, my connection with this place and people has grown, giving a deeper purpose and meaning to my life, and I'm very grateful for that. After moving out of Santa Barbara, which was a while ago, I have been visiting visiting the temple and Sharda Math with my husband, daughter, and many of family and friends who are always welcome here heartily. And thank you for that. The steadfast devotion, selflessness, contentment, and peace, joy and positivity, through it all, the mudslides and the fires, the famous Santa Barbara fires, are my North Star, and I aspire to be like that. I also think there are few places in the world like Himalayas where the beauty of nature meets God, and this temple is definitely one of them. And I sincerely pray to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother to protect this legacy.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. My name is Jessica. I've been coming to Vedanta Center since I was about 6 years old, but I really didn't start taking it seriously until I turned about 19. And during that time, I got to do what's affectionately called the Nun for a Month program. And first, I was at the Hollywood Temple for a few days or up to a week when I was brought here actually by Swami Sarvadevananda, who drove me up here on his way to stay at the temple. And I was very shy at the time, so I remember that when we got in the car, we were driving for a while, and I wasn't speaking or anything, and he turned to me and he said, well, this is going to be a long, quiet car ride. So that was the first moment of getting kind of woken up, getting kind of like awakened a little bit more in myself. And we drove from Hollywood to here, and along the way, I'm very fortunate I got a private lecture for myself, and that was wonderful. But as we turned up Ladera Lane, I suddenly was struck by this really weird feeling. I don't think I've ever shared this before, that I had been here before. It was very odd. It was just really weird. And that was another moment of kind of like waking up a little bit. When I got to the convent, I immediately met all the nuns. Excuse me. And at the time, it was Krishna Prana, Vraja Prana, Bhava Prana, Sita Prana, Ananda Prana, Devi Prana, and Borda Prana. Plus, I think Panda, the Shih Tzu, and Priscilla, the Scotty. Rosie and the kittens would come much later. Okay. So immediately when I came in, I got hit with all these names that were multisyllabic, and I was just like, I don't know who any of these people are. But later that night, when I went into my room, Sita Prana had actually left a little cheat sheet for me. Bhava Prana, the tall one. Vraja Prana, the short one. Krishna Prana, the shorter one. So I was in... So immediately, this coming into this temple or coming into the convent, seeing that the nuns could recognize things in me, the help that I needed and the support that I needed, in many just small little ways. I remember the first meal that we had together at the kitchen table was pozole that Krishna Prana had made, and it was very, very spicy. But again, I was very shy, and I wanted to be a good guest. So I'm eating this pozole, and my eyes are running, and my nose is running, and I am just trying to eat this very, very hot soup. Until finally Krishna Prana turned over to me and said, Jessica, you don't have to eat this. I was like, thank God. So again, another moment of just they're recognizing something that I needed without me really having to say or ask for that help. And this continued during my time staying at the convent, being part of the routine and getting to experience what it was like to live here at the temple and working with Sita Prana in the garden, or helping out cleaning in the shrine, or helping cook the afternoon meal. It put me into this routine and helped give me something that I didn't even realize that I needed, and helping me establish the rhythms of spiritual life. Something that was incredibly important for me in developing that routine was coming to Arati the first time. And I had never experienced it before. And when I sat down in the temple the first time and the singing started, it was like I got struck with lightning. It was really intense, amazing experience. But again, I'm very shy. So I'm hearing this, I'm sitting down, and I just hadn't been initiated yet. So I thought that what you do when you're in a temple, you just sit there and you have to be quiet and you just look forward at the shrine. And so I heard this music going and I didn't know where it was coming from, this angelic voices. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, what is this? This is amazing. Finally, at the end of my time there, I turned around to see that there's a balcony up there. And now this is where it's happening. Otherwise, it just seemed otherworldly and magical. But it really captures what a special place this is. While I was staying here the first time, as I said, Border Prana and Ananda Prana were living here. During that time, Border Prana was in more advanced stages of her Alzheimer's, so I wasn't able to really talk and connect with her in the way that I would have liked. But I loved sitting with Ananda Prana and listening to her stories, and I enjoyed that time so much with her. Now, please don't take this the wrong way, but when you first start coming to Vedanta temples, often people, other devotees will come up to you and, they want to know your story of how you come into Vedanta. And sometimes there's this baseline assumption that you're coming from a Christian background, which is not my case. And it made me start to feel a little bit like, am I really fitting in here? It made me feel a little bit like an outsider. And that I wouldn't be quite understood where my spiritual background is coming from. But sitting with Ananda Prana was incredibly important because she would tell me stories about her life, as I think Annie mentioned, her life growing up in Germany as a young Jewish girl and her experience with anti-Semitism and having to come here as a refugee. And that was very important to me as a Jewish person, to hear her story and to be able to just recognize myself in somebody that was living a monastic life and recognizing that a Jewish person can make Vedanta part of their life. And that was very important to me. I don't know how important, for herself, her own Judaism was, but for me, that always stuck with me, the stories that she told me about her life, and I'll always remember that from her. So I came to the Vedanta temple this first time and immediately just fell in love with the nuns that were here. And basically after that, I came back every month. I would come back every month and just stay with them, and we would cook together, and I would work in the garden. We'd bake cookies and do puzzles with Viveka Prana, and it was just a wonderful time. When I went away to college at UC Santa Cruz, this became home. This was my halfway point between being in college and my parents, and so this was where I always stopped. Always happened to have a birthday here, and there always happened to be cake. It was great. And when I started telling my friends in Santa Cruz about this wonderful place in Montecito, it's so beautiful. They, in college, everybody's looking to find themselves, right? So my friends would want to come and stay here with me and be friends from all different backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and some of them had a lot of trauma associated with religion. But when they would come here and the nuns would greet them, they would make them feel so welcome in this place. And coming into the temple opened something within them, just as it did for me, because I feel like the temple here is the home of the heart, and it unlocks something in your own heart. So even years later, some of these friends have only come to the temple or met the nuns one time, but they still always ask, how are they doing? Because it made such an impression on their lives. And that's what this place, and that's what these women do for so many of us. So just to conclude, I love you guys. If I talk about it, I'm going to cry, so I'm not going to do that. But I just want to say, I just want to say a prayer to God, thank you so much for having this place be available for the nuns to be here. And thank you to all the nuns that I haven't even met in the past, and those that are coming into the future, hopefully, and everybody that has sat in this space and imbued this temple with their love and their spiritual energy, because I think we can all feel it when we're here, and it's immediate, and it helps you find your true self that's in your heart. So thank you.
Good. I didn't see you on the street. I was going to go up and look for you, Casey.
I'm here. On a cold, overcast morning in the Montecito Hills, a young man in his 20s sat for meditation in this very temple. It was just him sitting cross-legged in the back row, and an elderly woman with short hair sitting in the chair closer to the shrine. Just after 7 a.m., to the young man's surprise, the woman began to speak in a melodious voice. "Chant the name of the Lord and his glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean, and quench that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. O name, stream down in moonlight on the lotus heart, opening its cup to knowledge of thyself. O self, drown deep in the waves of his bliss, chanting his name continually, tasting his nectar at every step, bathing in his name, that bath for weary souls." And that's what I was at the time, a weary soul searching for peace and meaning in my life and the world around me. The woman was Viveka Prana, and the words were the prayer of Sri Chaitanya. I'd been meditating for a bit before I ever visited this temple. It was the late 90s, and Lee, my boss at the time, was on a spiritual quest of his own. We would talk about meditation over lunch. One day he mentioned a temple in Montecito that was a great place to sit. The second I walked through those doors, I felt at home. I had no idea who the man above the shrine was, but I knew Jesus and Buddha. Why were they here? Was this really a place of spiritual harmony? Various are thy names, O Lord. In each and every name thy power resides. I devoured the literature and returned to the temple for my first Vespers. There was a different woman standing at the shrine this time, ringing a bell and performing arati. It was Viveka Prana. When she was done, she left a small bag of snacks on the chair next to me. Not long after discovering the temple, I began dating my wife, Christina, we would go on hikes in Romero Canyon and come down for Vespers afterwards. Soon we met the nuns, whose names were difficult to remember, except for the prana at the end. Viveka Prana, who'd given us prasad during Vespers, was snack prana. We had other names for Krishna Prana, Raja Prana, Bhava Prana, Brahma Prana, Shakti Prana, Nanda Prana, and the young woman who wore white. She was Bimala, a monastic in training, but we called her Nada Prana. Brahma Prana was quick to invite us to the classes. She answered many of our questions and encouraged us to take initiation from Swami Swahananda. Take no honor to thyself, give honor to all, chant unceasingly the name of the Lord. As we spent more time here, we met others who had become dear friends and companions on the journey. We experienced our first Durga Puja and met the larger community. We went to our first Shiva Ratri, digging deep within ourselves to stay for all 4 watches. I began sweeping the temple walkways with encouragement from Stephen every Sunday before the lecture. Christina redesigned the temple website with Bhava Prana. A drowning man in this world's fearful ocean is thy servant, O sweet one. In thy mercy, consider him as dust beneath thy feet. Eventually, we moved down the street and quickly learned how dynamic the natural environment is here in Toro Canyon. When the Thomas Fire and subsequent mudslides ravaged this area, we lived in the guest house for over a month, getting a real taste of the monastic life. There was no running water, so we carried buckets up from the cistern, conserving each drop for washing and flushing toilets. We lived simply, buoyed by the wisdom that all events, good and bad, are the play of Maya. O thou, who stealest the hearts of thy devotees, do with me what thou wilt, for thou art my heart's beloved, thou, and thou alone. I can't express enough our thanks to the nuns who've given, taught, and fed us so much. Pranams to Krishna Prana, to the Guru, to Swami Prabhupada for having the wisdom and fortitude to start a temple here. May this sacred building always stand and be a refuge for those seeking peace and understanding, just as it did for me many years ago. Congratulations on your Diamond Jubilee.
Casey, you took my schedule. Someone did. Priya, did you take it? Okay, while I wait to get it back, I'll tell you one thing. Yes, Casey and Christina lived in our guest house for a month, and we called ourselves the Pod, because we couldn't get out. And without Casey and Christina, we would not have done half as well as we did. They had all the camping equipment. They had the stoves, they had the solar battery chargers. They kept us really connected in a certain way. But as Christina said, what did we do all day? Water management. Okay. And now we would like Ingrid Bowman to come up and give hers and her daughter's reminiscence.
I'm at the end because mine is so long. It's 10 pages. Just kidding. So we wrote this a couple months ago when my daughter was packing and getting ready to leave for college, and she's at college now. So that's why I'm reading for her, and she's 18. Our nuns at the Santa Barbara Vedanta Temple have been a part of our family since our daughter Isabella started going to the Sunday talks when she was 3 years old. The opportunity to leave her with the nuns at Sunday school enabled us to attend the adult talks. Our love for this Vedanta community has deepened through our regular attendance over the past 15 years, especially because Krishna Prana and Vraja Prana are like angel grandmothers to us. It's no surprise that we are celebrating the Diamond Jubilee, since time flies when you're with the nuns. Isabella writes, I would wake up every Sunday excited to go to temple for Sunday school. My parents would go to the adult lecture, and I would happily skip off with the nun on duty that week to pick flowers to offer in the little shrine. Krishna Prana and Vraja Prana taught us that kids' prayers are the most powerful, so everyone was given the opportunity to pray for something or someone important. The most exciting part of Sunday school, however, was the prasad. We would make popcorn to offer in the shrine and check the prasad bowl for chocolates and cookies. This Santa Barbara community of nuns, both junior and senior ones, have brought us joy in a million little ways. Karma yoga days, lunch at the convent, choir groups, conversations, home visits, retreats, Easter egg hunts, Bhagavad Gita readings, and of course, the annual Christmas pageant. At times, there were many children and sheep participating in the celebration on Christmas Eve. Isabella writes, Christmas time at Vedanta was always a huge deal for the Sunday school because it meant rehearsing for the Christmas pageant. As we reenacted the birth of baby Jesus, the nuns were there to support us from both backstage and in the loft. Vraja Prana in the choir loft arranged our kids' version of Away in a Manger, and Krishna Prana backstage orchestrated the outfit changes and made sure our angel wings were not smashed as we came through the narrow curtain openings. Christmas at Vedanta is magical. We spend it singing carols, listening to the reading of the gospel, and experiencing the power of everyone coming together to celebrate. Vajraprana's voice coaching shaped me into the singer I am today. Her undying support for my music aspirations have pushed me to continue singing even when I wanted to give it up. Vedanta is one of my most special spaces. Thanks to the nuns, I am able to access my spiritual side at Vedanta. All three of us are eternally grateful for everyone at the Vedanta convent. Krishna Prana and Vajra Prana feel like part of our extended family, teaching, supporting, and guiding us always on this journey. Congratulations on your 75 years.
Now we'll have bhajans, and after the bhajans are over, it's over. And we want to thank all of you for being here. I'll thank you before the bhajans are over, but please stay for them.
Y'all have the words. So
Yes. So, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything you do and everything you contribute every day.
we'll start with Sadhguru Vivekananda. Sarada, oh Sarada. I can't hear y'all. The words are easy, they're printed out, you have copies.
George, I do have one more thing to say afterwards. It's going to be a Swami Swanananda. Acha, just one more thing. When you're finished.
So, Sarada, oh Sarada, very easy words, okay? There we go.
Sa
I now understand why Swami Swahananda said, Acha, just one more thing. I thanked everyone for coming. I thanked everyone for being here and supporting this. And I forgot one of the most important. Thank you, Swami Sarvadevananda, for encouraging us to do this. Most of you will not know this, but when Swami Sarvadevananda first told us it was the 75th anniversary of the convent, we went, "Are you sure? Haven't we been more than 75 years? I don't think we have to celebrate that this year." I mean, it was the most lukewarm response anyone would ever get. And he persevered. And I don't know about anyone else, but I know that I've had a wonderful time today. And I have found out more things from everyone than I knew. I found out more about our own history than I knew. And it's all because of Swami Sarvadevananda's perseverance in pursuing this occasion. And your love. Well, it takes the love to persevere that this lukewarm response that he got. Are you sure? I don't think it's 75 years. Surely it's 76. We missed it already. I mean, we said that to him. But we do want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being the head of the society here and for supporting us so graciously. Thank you.
I thank you all, those who are participating here and also online. It is a blessed occasion because we now understand more who we are and what is our background, where is our resource, and what is our speciality of this Vedanta movement. And it is a wonderful thing, though it is very small in the whole of US, our number of monks and nuns, and particularly the monks and nuns, are so limited. But it is to be understood that behind it is the Lord's hand. So it is silently working. It is only seed form, who knows. As Swami Sri Ramakrishna said, Vivekananda said, that this movement will continue to move on for 1500 years. What has happened now is nothing. We know in the future what will happen, but this is continuing. I think that is the dedication of you, all the nuns and the monks who are maintaining this, and the devotees who are supporting this ideology and philosophy. And the simple idea which touched my heart listening to all the reminiscences, the simple life of no pretense of spirituality, but simple life, leading our life and loving God and doing our best as we can do, and simply give something what we have to give. This philosophy of giving, and this giving is including everyone into our fold. So I thank you all, because I was thinking that it should be more in a gorgeous way, much more. We could have done bigger way. At least this was done. I am so happy. So my regards and respect for all of you, and my love for all of you. Thank you all.